fantasy football in 2025 was definitely not perfect. I'm going to be going through a bunch of lessons I learned while playing best ball for the first time in 2025. So I'm going to run through a bunch of stuff, positive, negative, that I learned while playing fantasy football in general, but more specifically best ball in 2025. I did just about 60 drafts, 60 best ball teams. I have a couple regular like fantasy leagues that I was in, but best ball alone, I did about 60 drafts, and I'm going to run through everything that I kind of learned and took from it, negative, positive. So let's get into it. First thing I wanted to touch on was just to go with your gut. I'm going to start with Patrick Mahomes. He was my most drafted quarterback. I drafted him about 20% of the time. It was coming off a down year in 2024 and 2023, honestly, and had an ADP of 77. He was QB6, and he's had a great year. He ranks 2 currently in scoring. If we go over here, he ranks 2 in scoring, just below Josh Allen, who was consensus number 1 quarterback. And I did have a lot of Josh Allen as well, I believe. Right here, just over 10%, almost 11% drafted in my leagues. But that's what I was going to get into next. Josh Allen, proven number 1 quarterback. I drafted him a decent amount. He was in my top 10 quarterbacks drafted as far as percent drafted. And he's having a phenomenal year. He had a great year. So I was definitely on Mahomes and Allen, and I feel like I nailed those picks. Another guy that I drafted a lot of that had an ADP of 81. So that's like the 6th, 7th round in 12-team leagues, was Tyler Warren. He is my most drafted tight end, just around 15% drafted, and he's having an awesome rookie season. We'll go over to tight ends here. I believe underdog is half PPR scoring format, so I'm going to sort by that. And he's number 4. Number 4 tight end, and coming into the season, he was tight end 5. But solid year for him, outperforming guys like Brock Bowers, Dallas Goedert, Tucker Kraft. He did have the injury, but still outperforming those guys. Only guys above him were McBride, Kelsey, and Ferguson. Not by a lot either. Kelsey and Ferguson have 3 to 4 more points on the season than Warren. So I'd consider that a pretty good pick there. Brock Bowers, only 4% drafted for me because he was drafted so high. He had an ADP of 19.8, and he was obviously the tight end 1 coming into the season. And he's still obviously a great player. But I just kind of recognized, like, top tight end, not a great offense, not a great quarterback with Geno Smith. And it's honestly hard to repeat in that type of situation. He had a phenomenal 2024, caught, 5 touchdowns only, but had 112 receptions and almost 1,200 yards. And he's not even close to that currently. I believe he might have been out a few games, but still, the yardage has really, really dragged behind with only a few more games left in the season. Second thing I want to get to, injuries are a problem, and injuries happen, and you honestly can't really control it. For example, a guy like Aaron Rodgers stayed healthy the whole season. I think he's 42, and Jaden Daniels had a freak injury and was kind of injured all season, didn't have a great season. So it really, really can happen to anyone. Going into drafts next season or pre-2026 season, I definitely think I'm not really going to care much about age. I know it can be a factor, especially with some running backs. I drafted a lot of Derrick Henry, drafted Najee Harris, which sucks that he got hurt. Joe Mixon hasn't even played. That's another thing. Drafting guys that are injured prior to the season starting, I don't think I'll do again. Unless it's a star player who I know is coming back within a few weeks or has a timetable, I just won't do it again because you just can't rely on when they're going to come back. And by the time they do come back, you might have already missed your window to even advance to week 15. For those who don't know how underdog works in the best ball drafts, you play week 1 through 14. And if you place, it's usually like first, second, or third in your league, essentially. You advance to week 15, and then so on and so forth. You keep going 14, 15, and then 16, and then 17 is the final, I guess you could say. But if you're drafting a guy who's injured to start the season, you might not even make it to that point in the season. So I'll probably stay away from doing that in the future as well. Rookies. Another big thing that I wanted to touch on for future me or future people who are drafting in best ball leagues in the future. Rookies can have high upside, but they also can be complete busts. I wanted to touch on a few. Do that. Okay, there we go. Wanted to touch on a few. Hold on here. All right, looks like we're good to go. I just want to touch on a few rookies, and I wanted to start with Ashton Jeanty. Currently running back 14, and he was drafted in the first round of most best ball leagues. He was drafted in the first round. Let's see where his actual ADP was. Yeah, so he had a final ADP of 13, which is just outside the first round. He was running back 6 off the board. And currently, in total fantasy points, he ranks 14th with 160. Not even in the top 10, and you spent a first-round pick on him. Most people did in the best ball format. Another guy who went pretty early was Travis Hunter, who was a big rookie, huge hype. I think he went in the 4th to 5th round of leagues. Obviously, injuries derailed his season, but even prior to his injury, he was not having the best season. So, again, the hype around rookies is always going to be there. And I feel like drafting them early might not be always the best approach. You just have no clue at what they're going to do in the NFL, how the NFL is going to impact their ability to perform, or if they're going to have the same results as they did in college. I mean, Jeanty was insane at Boise State, and he came into an offense that wasn't too good, and he's got 4 rushing touchdowns and 4 receiving touchdowns this season. It's not like I was expecting anything different. I feel like I didn't draft too much of him. I had 5 shares of him, around 10% drafted. So I think I definitely drafted him as he fell into the second round a lot, but I was not too high on him in the first round. And I mean, if you drafted him in the second or third round somehow, you probably just got back what you drafted him at. But if you drafted him in the first round and he was going high, some people were picking him at pick 7, 8, 9 in these drafts, and that just kind of fell apart, especially with how poor the Raiders' offense has looked in 2025. But rookies can also be league winners. I picked a couple guys just from like lower ADP coming into the season that could have absolutely won you your best ball league, first or second. So the three guys I wanted to touch on were Tyler Warren, who I talked about previously, Emeka Egbuka, who I drafted a little bit of, but was kind of unsure about how he was going to perform coming into an offense already with two dominant receivers in Godwin and Mike Evans. Hindsight's 2020, but I probably should have figured that Evans or Godwin would get hurt during the season, which would make Egbuka's role just that much bigger. Warren had an ADP of 81, like I said previously. He's currently the fourth best tight end in the league. Egbuka was wide receiver 28 coming into the season. And let's look and see where he is currently. So currently we're through 14 weeks, and he is 14th at the wide receiver position alone. So that's a heck of a lot of value you got if you drafted him at his ADP of the 28th wide receiver off the board in these underdog formats. You see, no, I drafted him. Yeah, so I drafted him in three leagues. He's definitely slowed down towards the end of the season, but he's still a monster. 806 yards total, 6 touchdowns, and if you drafted him, it's not like, now obviously the playoffs are going to start, but he got you to the playoffs, which is kind of the goal. Once you get in, you can have 1 or 2 great weeks, and that can kind of catapult you through the playoffs. So really my goal for next year is just find players to get me there, get me into the playoffs. I don't necessarily care how great I do in the playoffs, but obviously goal is to win it all. But things can change, things can fluctuate, so it's some luck at that point. But he definitely helped you out if you drafted Emeka Egbuka. And then Warren, I went over him earlier. I believe he still leads the Colts in receiving yards. He's got 699 currently, 4 touchdowns receiving, 1 rushing. I was even expecting a little more when I drafted him at the start of the season. I was expecting a little more on the ground. I know obviously 1 rushing touchdown is great for a tight end, but he was so dynamic at Penn State. I just thought he might have a little bit more opportunities, especially at the goal line. I'm assuming that these 6 attempts were at the goal line, and I'm really not sure now what will happen with him now that Daniel Jones is done and out for the season. We'll see what happens with him in the playoffs. Most of my teams that did advance do have Warren on them, considering I drafted him 15% of the time, and he was a great pick. So that's not a shocker. And the other one that I wanted to mention, the rookies, was Teteroa McMillan, who I didn't draft one time in the standard format. I drafted him a few times in the Superflex format, but I had 46 teams in the regular standard 1 quarterback drafts, and I didn't draft him one time. I feel like his ADP was just, it felt too high for me at the time. But looking at it now, obviously, I wish I had some exposure to him. He currently ranks 10th in wide receiver scoring. He's got 147 fantasy points. And yeah, he's top 10 receiver. I figured that him playing in the Carolina offense would really hinder him. But Bryce Young has definitely locked in on him as the number one receiver in Carolina. So that was definitely a mistake. But that just kind of shows you that some of the later rookie players can definitely outperform the early hype type rookies that are coming in. Gentry, obviously huge bust, and then Travis Hunter was also a big bust, I would assume, for most people. But Warren, Meke Buka, and then Tet definitely went crazy this season. Probably got a bunch of people into their playoffs. And then lastly, I want to remind myself and I want to remind everyone watching that a lot of this comes down to luck. I just looked at one draft that I actually streamed a while back, preseason obviously, and just kind of broke down what went on during the draft, who went in the first couple rounds, and looking at the values, what went right, wrong, and it's kind of it's hard to tell. There's really no blinking flashers that this guy's going to be amazing or this guy's going to be a total dud. But just recapping one of the first rounds. So 4 of the 7 wide receivers in the first round ended up in the top 7. I believe, so that was, you're looking at the screen here, those 4 receivers were Puka, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Jamar Chase, and Nico Collins. The other 3 that were drafted in the first round were CeeDee Lamb, who is down here at 21. That was partially due to injury. He's only played 10 games. So obviously can't predict that. There's the luck part of it. Justin Jefferson, who is down here at 25. He has started every game. And obviously you could have looked at J.J. McCarthy as a sign of, I guess, not a star quarterback, not a great quarterback throwing the ball to him. But, I figured, and I guess everyone else figured, that he would just make it work and he would get a bunch of targets and score a bunch of touchdowns. But it didn't really happen. He's got 2 on the season. He does have 109 targets. But 109 targets and only 64 receptions. So just kind of shows you where things went wrong for him. The other receiver was Malik Neighbors, who obviously went down with the torn ACL, I believe. Let me look and see. Let's see where he was. So I sorted by fantasy points per game. He only played in the first 4 games, and he did rank in the top 15. But the top 15, that still doesn't even get you close to the value that you invested him in the first round of most of the best ball leagues. So still kind of shows you 4 receivers really panned out. 3 kind of were duds in those underdog best ball formats. And then it was only, so in ADP 1 through 12, there was only wide receivers and running backs. So I looked at all the running backs as well. 3 of the 5 running backs ended up in the top 5 through week 14 in 2025 at the running back position solely. Those 3 were Bijan, Jahmyr Gibbs, and Christian McCaffrey. So McCaffrey. So early on in the offseason, you could have got McCaffrey in the second round, I believe. I think, let me look and see where his, let me see where his ADP ended up. So his ADP ended up being 6.6. I think these are right. So 6.6. But early in the offseason, I was getting him at like 12. Like 12. It was like 10 to 14. So that was definitely a value. And obviously everyone was really nervous about the injury history with him. But that's where the luck comes in. Like, that's why I just wanted to remind myself that so like most of this is literally luck. I mean, you can only know so much, and you can draft what's a perfect team, but injuries can definitely derail the season. But those were the top three. So Bijan, Gibbs, CMC all ended up being drafted in the first round of these leagues, and they all panned out. McCaffrey's the second running back currently. Gibbs is the third running back currently, and then Bijan's down here at 5. Jonathan Taylor and Achane. So Achane was another guy I wanted to point out too, because that was another player that everyone was a little bit hesitant to draft, especially late in the preseason, because he had some injuries pop up, and people were just concerned about that. But he recovered in time to start the season, was healthy, and now he's RB4 in 2025. Also, Jonathan Taylor really shocked me. I mean, I knew he had it in him. I feel like I didn't draft. I drafted him in one league. So that killed me. Like that absolutely crushes you when you have a guy who's an absolute league winner and you just don't invest enough into him. It's gonna tank a lot of your teams. And I can see it. 2021, he went crazy. 18 touchdowns, 1,800 rushing yards, and even 2 receiving yards. But 2022, 2023, 2024 just weren't great. He also had some injuries. But that comes back to the Mahomes, where I talked about Mahomes. Like, he had a couple down years. 2023, 2024 weren't great. But you see it here in 2022. He went crazy. And obviously he's not going to get to 41 passing touchdowns, but he's already at four rushing touchdowns, and he's already got more rushing yards than he did in 2022. That's why he's on pace to score more than he did in 2024 and 2023. That would also kind of lead me to believe that scoring for quarterbacks is down a little bit this season, considering he didn't finish in the top 5 last year in quarterbacks, with 293 points here, and is the second ranked quarterback. I mean, there is a couple weeks left, so I guess I'm not thinking about that, but you get what I'm saying. Guys like Mahomes, Jonathan Taylor, they had great seasons in the past. They always can do it again. You have to remember they always can do it again. So you might as well, in this format, you might as well take a couple shots on those guys, because it only takes 1 or 2 great picks to carry your team to the playoffs. And then I want to just wrap up the running backs. The big busts in the first round, 2 of them, Barkley and Genty. I mean, Barkley was basically the number 1, number 2 pick in most drafts, and he just hasn't had a good season. He's been healthy, played 13 games. Same with Genty. He's played 13 games, has been super healthy, but Barkley ranks 12th, Genty ranks 14th in overall fantasy points. And when you're drafting those guys in the first round of leagues, when they're the 12th and 14th best running back at the running back position, it's just not gonna return value at all. If I just go to all players here. So if I go to all players, can I sort by... No, I can't. All right. If I sort by all players, they got to be Barkley's 37th, Genty's 41st. So taking out the quarterbacks, they're probably returning you a value of a second to third round pick, which is still okay. But when you have other running backs that you could have drafted later, like Jonathan Taylor was drafted in the second, third round of leagues, James Cook, Javonte Williams, that was an absolute steal. Javonte Williams, I probably don't have much of him either. I actually do. I have 13% of Javonte Williams. He's got to be on a couple teams that did advance for me then. There's no way that he's not. Yeah. Crazy season from him kind of out of nowhere. And he had an ADP of 119. So another guy like Jonathan Taylor, if you picked him, I mean, you could have had Williams and Taylor on the same team, only have invested, second or third round pick in Taylor and a, 9th, 10th round pick in Javonte Williams, maybe 11th round pick in Javonte Williams, and those guys could have essentially carried your team to the playoffs. And then I just want to kind of wrap it up by showing my future self too. Just a couple players that I drafted late in drafts. Obviously, you're going to do that in these formats. And it's hard not to get into a rhythm of drafting guys if you're doing like consecutive drafts, to draft the same player because you like them in the moment, or you saw a piece of news, or you saw something that made you think they would have a bigger role. Like, don't overreact, and towards the end of the drafts, draft different, make it diverse, draft different guys. Like, there was probably no need for me to draft 17% of Rashad Bateman, or like, this is bad. This is just bad. Let me look for other guys here. So I have 15% of Michael Wilson. Just looking at this, this could actually be pretty good going into the playoffs. I think I have him on a few of my teams too. He's kind of taken over the role of wide receiver one if Marvin Harrison is out still. I think he could have a pretty great playoff performance for the teams that still have him on their roster, that made it to the playoffs, I guess. But yeah, like guys like I'm sure he was a late round pick. I mean, he had an ADP of 206. There's no reason to draft 15% of him. Let me look. Jalen McMillan, another guy that I figured he would recover from his injury and be back, and he just didn't. I mean, I drafted him 13% of the time, and he hasn't even played a game. So I gotta stay away from players that are injured preseason, who have basically no timetable. Another guy, Austin Eckler. Just some of these is just bad. Let me try to find. Like, here's a guy. Oh, Kai Williams actually had a higher ADP. Yeah, I would say the best example is probably him here from Cincinnati. Just too high of a share. 15% is just too high. Gotta draft different guys in the later rounds. When it gets to the end of the draft, make sure you're taking guys that are different, especially if you're drafting a bunch of these teams, because you can have this happen where they just totally dud out, or don't even get on the field like Jalen McMillan, like totally miss with that pick. So, but yeah, I'd say those are the kind of things that those are the lessons I learned basically about playing this type of format for really the first time. I haven't done this many drafts ever. So I have a few teams that did advance. I'll probably be streaming or having a video out in the next few days going over those teams, which teams I think will actually have a chance at winning or going far or advancing to at least week 16, getting by 15. But those, I believe, 4 things. Really go with your gut, especially if you're like, if you have it set, like I had Mahomes set that he was going to have a bounce back season. Go with your gut. Take that guy. Proven great players like Josh Allen are going to be good barring an injury. And that's completely random, so you can't really draft off that. You'll see here 3 straight 400-point seasons, 385, and then he's basically on pace for between 380 and 400 again, with a few weeks left to go. So go with your gut with those picks as well. Injuries happen. Don't always trust rookies, especially as they get hyped up like crazy in the preseason. Look at the situations. Are they going into a good situation? The rookies who usually thrive are going into a situation where they are able to thrive. Egbuka, great quarterback, also great wide receivers around him. Tyler Warren, Daniel Jones, a great quarterback in 2025 at least, who spread the ball around and also had other weapons around him to kind of shield him. Tet McMillan was going to be the number 1 receiver in the offense, and they all panned out. So don't always trust the players like Ashton Genty who are going into a tough situation, and it's already going to be an uphill battle for them. And then lastly, it sometimes just comes down to luck. Players get hurt, things happen, players get traded, which creates different situations on teams. So not everything's always perfect, and not everything is always the same as it is preseason and before the season starts. So hopefully everyone, including myself, can come back and watch this video as they start drafting for 2026, just to kind of remind themselves of what to do, what not to do, and things to look out for when you're drafting in 2026. Other than that, have a great night, great weekend, and hopefully you come back to this in future years to kind of remind yourself of what to do and what not to do, what to look for, and what to kind of ignore.